Really didn't have a chance to update the Shine fight situation, which kind of came and went and was weird. And there was a bunch of drama last week as Don King got involved in MMA sort of and stopped this card with Ricardo Mayorga. So where are we now on this, and why did it get so dicey there, where everyone kind of freaked out? North Carolina freaked out, and Mayorga and Shine fight said, "The heck with it, we can't risk this."
Well, Shine Fights didn't say they couldn't risk it, Steve. That was totally a call made by the North Carolina Athletic Commission. So that was a big issue there. They were concerned there was no doctor there. There were a number of issues that they were concerned about, that are things that you would think they would have straightened out prior to going into the fight. And it was complicated by the fact that Devin Price, who is the CEO of Shine, was in Florida all day. Instead of leaving it to his attorneys, he was in Florida with his attorneys for the case. So as a result, it made it very difficult. They're trying to get Mayorga eligible to fight, but the North Carolina Commission had some issues that they needed to settle with the head man of Shine, and he wasn't there. He was going to charter a plane, but I talked to him late in the evening after the pay-per-view was supposed to start, I think around 6 Pacific or so, and he was still in Florida at that point.
So this is a positive or negative for MMA?
Well, I mean, it's never, it's certainly never a positive when a pay-per-view, goes off. I mean, it's understandable what happened. I mean, who could have possibly seen it going this way? Seeing Mayorga, they talked about Mayorga fighting for Shine back in September, and it was a good little card. Not, not the greatest card in the world, but I think there was some intrigue to it and a couple of good fights. And, I think people would have, been interested to see how does a real boxer do, a guy that's been a top-level boxer very recently, do against an MMA fighter. I think there certainly would have been a lot of interest in that fight. That would have kind of been an interesting precursor to Randy Couture and James Toney in the UFC coming up in the summer. So it was too bad that it didn't come off. And I don't think it's going to hurt the sport. I mean, it's not going to be a blip on the UFC's radar. It's not going to be a blip for Strikeforce. It's not going to be a blip for Bellator. But certainly for Devin Price and Shine trying to get back together, that's going to be a tough job. I mean, they're going to have a lot of, as Ricky Ricardo would say, a lot of splaining to do.
See, I actually think it's a positive. Like you mentioned, if North Carolina had concerns, then don't let the fight card go on. And here's the other thing. For the consumer and the fight fan, if you bought tickets to that live event, or you paid, you were going to pay for the pay-per-view, you're buying it because of Mayorga against Din Thomas. You're not buying it to see Ninja Hua and David Heath as a main event. Right. So to me, it's consumer protection as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's the commission's role.
Oh, I know.
I don't think that's their role. But I think, ultimately it ended up working out that way. I mean, if I'm going to pay for that pay-per-view, I'm the average fan. I want to see Mayorga and Dean Thomas. And then, the thing was, Mayorga fought Oscar De La Hoya in 2006. He fought Shane Mosley in 2008. So he had been in with top-level boxing guys, Fernando Vargas in between that very recently. Dean Thomas was in the UFC as recently as 2008. So, you're talking about two guys who are not what they were at their peak, but certainly they're still names. They've been around. They fought at the highest level from the two different sports, and I think there was a lot of intrigue behind that.
So why do you think King did this? Why was this so important for him?
I think plain and simple, the several $100,000 he claims that Mayorga owes him. I asked Mayorga that. Mayorga doesn't speak English, so it's all translated, and I got a bunch of curses in return. So it's hard to know the real answer. But King says he owes him several $100,000, and King's actions would back that up, Steve. I mean, King's actions would indicate to you, because what does he care about a Shine Fights card? And really, what does he care about Mayorga? Because, let's face it, I mean, Mayorga's lost 2 of his last 3. He's a whack job. I think in my story, I called him the Nicaraguan wild man, and I think that's, very true. This guy, who knows, what he's liable to say, what he's liable to do. And, given that he's lost so frequently in boxing, I don't think he has that much value. But King has worked really hard to try to get him a title fight, because that's where the most money is going to be, so King can get his money back. I think, plain and simple, that was it.
Earlier I said that Shine Fights kind of freaked out on this. I know North Carolina canceled the card, but Shine Fights did back down on the Mayorga thing. And there was a real fear here, right? That, I mean, you could be levied major fines, and guys could have been thrown in jail.
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard it on, I was working on the story Friday, and then on Saturday, when I first heard that Shine was going to go forward, I thought, well, the Florida court, has no jurisdiction, because I was under the impression that Shine was incorporated elsewhere, but I come to find out that they were incorporated in Florida, so they very well did have jurisdiction, and that was a big problem for them. So yeah, they could not have gone forward with that fight without facing some severe penalties, and including contempt of court. So, I don't think anybody wanted to spend a night in jail or more over Ricardo Mayorga. He's definitely not worth spending a night in jail over. I'm not sure he was worth $24.95 to buy the pay-per-view. I was going to buy it, but he's definitely not worth going to jail over.
Well, he turned out to be worth about 5 stories between yourself and me up on Yahoo. I put in one little nugget, and I know you had told me about this a while back, and I don't know if anyone picked up on it, but I was talking about Don King and MMA, if he has interest in it. He actually in the past did meet at least once with Dana White, is that right?
Yeah. And he's interested in promoting MMA. He was very close to signing Tito Ortiz. The first time Tito and the UFC had a split, Don King was in Vegas and made Tito an offer. He was going to work with Ross Goodman's organization, the WFL, and he was looking at doing a thing there, and he was going to try to sign Tito to a personal services contract and put him in that. So, and Don, in fact, when I talked to him the other day, 78 years old, he said, when I get into MMA, not if I get into MMA, when I get into MMA, I'm going to do it right. So we'll see if he does, but he's certainly interested, and it makes sense only from this standpoint. King is a huckster, and he's got the name. And he really, I think he always has to have that hustle going, and he wants something to keep him active. And he really doesn't have a deep roster of boxers anymore. He has very few marketable boxers at this point. It's amazing. 10 years to now, the difference in where King is. He was at the top of the world in 2000, and right now, he doesn't really have much to offer. So, that's, I think, where his interest in MMA is.
All right. We had just had a lot of viewers up on Yahoo that probably have their heads explode with the combination of Don King and MMA. So when you weren't in the room, but from what you gather on both sides, when he met with Dana White, what was discussed? What would even be the possibilities there?
Well, I think he was just trying to kind of get an idea of the MMA landscape from the UFC. Don knows Lorenzo Fertitta very well, and so I think that was really, kind of what it was doing. And I think, he wanted to say to the UFC, hey, look, I'm not stepping on your toes here. I think Don understands, the order of things in MMA, and I think, the first thing he wanted to do was go out there and create this big rift with the UFC. I think, if anything, Don's the kind of guy that would try to, really push very hard to work with the UFC, right. Get his own small organization, get a fight with the UFC, get one big name fighter, then push for that fight. As an example, wouldn't this be crazy? And this is just total, I'm making this up, but I'm saying this as an example. If Don King gets Fedor and signs Fedor to a promotional contract, now all of a sudden he goes back to the UFC, where M1 wanted part of it. All Don King is going to want is 5 things, MONEY. Want those 5 letters, and he's happy. So that's, I think, what Don talked to Dana about, kind of how would the possibilities be? If I did this, would you be open to it? If I did that, would you be open to it?
All right. You sure you want to throw that out there? Again, that was just a possibility. Not a real possibility. It was just kind of
an example.
The hypothetical. Don't scare people. Next headline, Fedor signing with Don King.
It'll be out there somewhere. You know it.
All right. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Steve.